Last month, I ran down 10 smart things that parks have done, and a few that were not so smart. These are just aspects of the business I noticed either going to the parks or working at the parks, and things I look at and say, wow, that makes so much sense, and a few other things that make you wonder who's in charge and what's wrong with them. At the end, I asked you all to give me more ideas for a part 2, things that you notice from your personal experience or observation that seem super smart, or just flat out don't make sense. I gathered all your responses, picked out the best one, and thanks to you, I'm able to bring you this video today. This is part 2 of the smartest and dumbest things parks have done. Let's start with the smart stuff, and the top response I got was offering free or double-sided lockers. Every park and ride has a specific set of rules. Some don't allow bags or souvenir bottles. Others don't allow phones or keys. Others don't allow anything. You find this in Australia, and I think Universal is the same way. When you're forcing people to put everything in a locker, you almost force them to use a smartphone to navigate the park. People need their keys to drive to and from the park, and then you make them buy a locker. The ride is essentially an upcharge attraction. Parks that offer free double-sided lockers at the front of the queue keep the riders safe and the riders happy. It's definitely something that costs them money, but it jacks up guest satisfaction. Single rider lines also got a few votes. These are designated lines where people can wait and fill in gaps in the trains. Most parks that use them don't use them on all the rides. Sometimes it's just the ones where it works out logistically, but from a customer standpoint, it's a great option. You're not cutting in front of anyone, you get on very fast. The only downside is you don't get to pick your row and you don't get to ride with your group. From a park standpoint, it doesn't really help, and it does increase the stress of the ride-ops to manage that line, but it could cut down on wait times by filling gaps on the train. And again, it increases guest satisfaction. Let's talk about food, and the inclusion of regional restaurants and premium options. It seems like when it comes to food, a lot of parks start with the bare minimum. They have 3 burger places, 3 pizza places, 3 chicken places, and they charge a ton to eat. That's fine, but you're also seeing premium options being offered also, like the Grain and Grill at Kings Island and Kings Dominion. You have local favorites like Skyline Chili at Kings Island, Chickies and Pete's at the northeastern parks. Cedar Point had a melt restaurant, but that just closed down. You're giving guests more options. You're giving them a taste of the region if they're from out of town. It benefits the customer, the park, and the company buying space in the park. Six Flags just introduced speedy parking last year. That's where you can register your license plate, use a special lane, and go right into the parking lot without waiting. I have not used this. Usually, I see people using the speedy lane who don't have speedy parking and they're just stopped. I don't think it works well when you have a preferred parking pass, but the idea is good and they offer it for free if your pass already has parking. This cuts down on long lines in the parking booth, assuming it's being used correctly. You won't need as much parking staff. It's just a good idea because, I don't know about you, but when I go to park, I always get behind the one guy who can't seem to figure out where his money is. Speaking of parking, from a park standpoint, making people pay for parking is diabolical, but very smart. These days, parking prices are insane. They're actually cartoonishly insane. I remember when parking got up to 25 bucks, that was ludicrous. And now, parks are charging 40 bucks like it's nothing. I know, they're using it as a tool to get you to buy a season pass that includes parking, but if you're just there for one day, too bad, you're paying it. How many people are not going to the park because of the parking price? Has that actually ever happened? Nah, I don't want to go because of the parking fee. Ticket prices, sure. Parking fee? I don't think so. It makes me wonder why the parks that offer free parking, as much as I love them, why they just don't break down and even charge a few dollars per car at least. It's low overhead, all profit, and, like most of these parks do, can be used as a tool to push people to buy a season pass. If you're making people pay a ton for parking, it encourages carpooling. That was a tactic used by parks back in the old days when they set a price per carload of people, not a price per person. This was awesome because the customer was saving money up front on the ticket price, but it encouraged big groups to come together. That's where all your in-park spending comes from, especially if those big groups are a family. Lose a bit up front, rake it in once they're inside. I used to see ads for this in the 70s and 80s, but I don't think any park is still doing this. Maybe they should bring it back. Once you're inside the parks, one smart thing just about all of them have done is create a useful app. Some are better than others, but using technology to enhance the overall experience has been a big positive. There are downsides of this also. We'll talk about that later, but when you can go on there and see which rides are open, the wait times for each ride, order food. At Six Flags, you don't have to wait to get skip-the-line tickets anymore. You can just do it on your phone. Not everything tech-wise is a good thing, but there are plenty of good things that have been done. I mentioned food, but parks have gotten smart with drinks also. Most places have an all-season drink option, and in the past, you had to wait in line with everyone else just to get a 2-second refill. Now, chains like Cedar Fair and parks like Hershey Park have scanners in the refill stations. You can scan your pass or bottle, and that unlocks the machine to get a refill. Quick, easy, prevents stealing, and doesn't jam up the food lines even more than they already are. Skipping the lines for drinks is one thing, but skipping the lines for rides is a whole different ballgame. Last episode, I mentioned the genius behind the skip-the-line systems. That was controversial, I get it. We teach our kids not to cut in line, but apparently it's okay if you pay for it. Hard to argue against that, but that's the way it is. And another new revelation is the one-shot pass. This is where you pay something like $7 to $15 to skip the line for one ride. You can do this instead of being stuck with an all-day pass that could cost $100. I never use this aside from Lightning Lane at Disney World, but more options are always good, and at some parks, all you might need is one, and this can save you a ton of money. For parks, it's just one more way to make money from people who don't want to pay for an all-day fast pass. Parks have also discovered upcharge experiences, and you see this a lot in Australia. DC rivals Hypercoaster, Leviathan, and Steel Taipan. For $25 to $30 Australian, you could ride backwards or spinning in the back. These offer amazing experiences, definitely worth doing at least once. And aside from ordering a custom train, this is just an endless stream of extra revenue. No overhead aside from the initial cost, and tons of money rolling in. From my experience, they'd be better off charging less and having more riders. Have a few people always in line to ride. As it is, I saw train after train going with an empty car. Let's talk marketing, and these parks seem to have found it useful to fix their brand to a known IP, and use that to market their rides. Six Flags has done it with Looney Tunes and DC Comics. Cedar Fair has done it with Snoopy. And for a while back in the 90s, it seemed like every company was out there pitching their brands in the parks. Paramount, Time Warner, Universal, Disney. We might get tired of the same brands being slapped on every ride, but apparently that kind of brand recognition sells. Aside from park chains and movie studios, sometimes you see manufacturers own or operate parks. This is a good way to make some extra money and showcase your own rides for the world to see. It seems like some manufacturers have trouble finding buyers for some of their projects, but if you're Mock Rides and you own Europa Park, you can do whatever you want. If you're Zamperla and you operate Luna Park on Coney Island or Tropic Falls in Alabama, you can put your new creations there and see who else is interested. Another good marketing trick is giving your ride a flashy new effect during an overhaul. You saw this when X became X2. That was totally necessary to keep the ride alive, getting new lighter trains. But that repaint, onboard audio, and fire effect made that overhaul so much more marketable. Same with Loch Ness Monster this past year. It got a bunch of new track, but it also got a Loch Ness statue at the end of the ride. Lights in the tunnel. It was pitched as a whole new ride experience. Parks will also upgrade their rides to make them more comfortable. You saw this with the Skyrest trains that came along with a new logo, but I'm mainly talking about the stand-up to floorless conversions. Stand-up coasters were kind of a gimmick back in the 80s and 90s. That totally fell out of favor, and a lot of people don't like standing on a coaster, especially when you kinda have to sit on a bike seat. For parks that don't have a floorless coaster, it made sense to make this conversion. That went along with a name change, a repaint, and pretty much marketing a whole new ride without paying the price. Cedar Point, California's Great America, Six Flags America. We'll see if anyone else follows suit. For big parks, these chains try to make big custom rides. That's especially true for Cedar Fair. So, what's the cheapest way to get your smaller parks something new? Clones, clones, and more clones. Larson Loops, Zamperla Discoveries, Starflyers, S&S Free Spins. These drive enthusiasts crazy, but if you're local and don't travel around, these are just fine, and that's what the parks care about. These cheap clones allow them to spread the money around the chain, albeit spread it quite thin. Cedar Fair has a bunch of small parks, and surprisingly, it makes up a big chunk of their chain pre-2006. That's when they did something incredibly smart, buying the Paramount parks. They paid a lot, $1.24 billion, but look at what they got. Kings Island, Carowinds, Canada's Wonderland. That makes up 3 of the top 4 parks. Also, King's Dominion and California's Great America. Those are more in the mid-tier. They turned around these parks, made some of them elite, and they've paid off and made the chain what it is today. Or I should say, what it was yesterday, before they merged with Six Flags. SeaWorld also had a major transformation about 10 years ago. This came on the heels of the Blackfish documentary, the public backlash that came with that, and their promise to phase out some of their marine shows. No longer breed orcas, be more educational and less sensational, and it's easy to see that as a downfall of the SeaWorld chain. Instead, they decided to go hard with new rides. Year after year, new coaster, new flat ride. It was an insane onslaught at all their parks, and up to this point, it seems like it's working out great for them. It may come crashing down later, but as of now, they seem to be on solid footing. SeaWorld, like a lot of parks around the world, are really pushing family coasters as of late. This is a great idea because they don't cost as much. They're fun for just about everyone, not just thrill seekers. And if you theme them, you can still market them. Family coasters these days are so much more advanced than they used to be. You have launch ones like Big Bear Mountain and Penguin Trek, inverted ones with sprawling layouts like Phoenix Rising and Dragonflyer, ones that change direction like Fire Chaser Express or Drayton Manor's Gold Rush. You can't always go the family route, but the way the parks have been handling it as of late is just awesome. Parks are also staying open later in the season, introducing more seasonal events. After the summer, parks capitalized on the Halloween season, and even when it got too cold to operate a lot of the rides, they found they could deck out the park in lights and make it a destination for families looking for something fun to do over the holidays. You also see events like Mardi Gras at Cedar Fair Parks, Festival of Nations at Dollywood, and the brilliant Scream Break at the Six Flags chain, bringing Fright Fest to the spring and getting all the kids to come on their week off of school. Parks can also lean on their history and give guests a sense of nostalgia, putting historical plaques around the parks to honor the past rides, reusing ride names, or playing off names of past coasters. We've had a bunch of those lately. From the Bat to Zambezi Zinger to Big Bad Wolf, the Wolf's Revenge. Sometimes the parks even sell parts of the rides that probably just throw out. They get money and the customer gets a piece of history. Sometimes the parks even sell parts of the rides that are probably just gonna throw out anyway. Finally, interactive merchandise is something you see at higher end parks, but they are a great way to rake in money, at the same time giving guests something they can play with and use. Universal has the Harry Potter wands, Knott's has the lanterns you can buy during Scary Farm, and something we bought during our 4-day trip to Disney World, the Magic Band. You use this instead of your ticket to scan around the parks. One thing parks used to do but don't do as much anymore is live concerts. Doing my documentaries over the last 4 years, it seems like every park held major music acts during the 70s and 80s and even 90s, and that's just not a big thing anymore. Magic Mountain stopped doing that a long time ago, and it seems like that and live entertainment was a major reason people would come to the park. Maybe times have changed and this is harder to sell these days. Or major artists don't want to appear at theme parks anymore. But it's weird, it was just abandoned after it was such a major part of these parks 30, 40, 50 years ago. Let's talk about some of the dumb things, all suggested by you. Let's start with the parks relying on you having a smartphone while in the park. A lot of parks are moving away from paper maps. No more flash pass pods or watches. Everything is on the app. When I went to Australia and wanted to buy a backseat ride on DC Rivals, I had everything except for my passport and credit card in a locker, but I was told I couldn't buy anything unless it was done on the app. So I had to go fish my phone out of my locker on the other side of the park. I know, smartphones are super common, but to assume everyone has one and you're kinda screwed if you don't, that's not a good thing. Also, it's hard to keep your phone charged all day. I bring battery packs, but it would be nice for parks to provide a place where you can go charge up. Disney has taken the app system to a new level, having rides that require a reservation. Sometimes you need to wake up at 6 a.m. to get a spot, and once you're in the park and using Lightning Lane, you only have so many you can use throughout the day, so a game plan and strategy are vital to have a good day. I personally love that whole game, but I know I'm a weird one. Most people just want to go and have fun without needing a Disney expert in their group. I haven't noticed this, but it seems like a lot of parks have removed their smoking areas. This is something that seems to have been introduced about 15 years ago, giving smokers a place to light up away from guests. I don't know why they would be taking these away. All that's going to do is encourage people to smoke anywhere they want in the park, and that seems like what they were trying to eliminate in the first place. Merchandise is also way overpriced, especially shirts. If you want to soak people for magnets and nano coasters, go ahead, but they should probably knock down the price of those shirts. Sometimes you're paying 30 to 40 bucks, but the parks should think of them as free advertising. Sell the shirt for 15 bucks, and now you got a walking billboard for your park. And the cheaper they are, the more they sell, the more exposure you have. Lately, we've been seeing parks advertise coasters for the upcoming season, and then not opening them. I know, there's a lot of factors that go into it, some expected, some unexpected, but I think the parks need to do a better job being realistic. After all, they're selling passes based on new rides coming next year, and in a lot of cases, these rides never open. The Flash at Great Adventure, Georgia Surfer at Over Georgia, these were completely canceled for the season. Aquaman at Over Texas was delayed because of COVID, but then got delayed for 3 more years after that. West Coast Racers at Magic Mountain caught the end of the year by a week. Primordial at Lagoon opened at the tail end of the season last year. It just seems like if you're buying the coaster late in the season and you know getting it open by the summer is going to be a problem, don't say it's going to be open in the summer. It seems like they can be accused of false advertising. For the rides that do open, a lot of parks choose to run them with one train. There's different reasons for this. Maybe they only have one train. That seems to be the problem with the rides at Darien Lake. If the park's slow, then sure, run one train. That cuts down on the number of cycles and the wear and tear on the ride. But on busy days, parks try to get away with one train and that backs up the line. All those people get stuck and aren't in the park spending money. Then, the park decides to delay the ride even more by putting the second train on way too late. That makes the problem worse before it gets better. It just seems like these parks need more common sense operations, knowing what's coming and knowing what's needed. Sometimes when parks open a new ride, or renovate an old ride, they add awesome effects. Animatronics, fire effects, onboard audio, and these work great at first, but they break down and the parks drag their feet fixing it. This gives a feeling of cheapness, of apathy. It's just not a good look for the park when your stuff doesn't work. People notice, so if you're gonna go the extra mile and add this stuff, keep it maintained. One specific ride that people point to as a dumb decision is Goliath at Six Flags New England. When this was at Magic Mountain as Deja Vu, it had those original Vekoma trains that had staggered seating. It was kinda confusing to know where to sit. 2 seats on the inside in the front row, 2 seats spread far apart on the outside. So when this moved to New England, they replaced it with standard 4-across trains built by Premier Rides. These notoriously ran rough, and it turned this once great ride into an absolute dumpster fire, leading to its closure in 2019. It may be just me, but I'd rather be a bit confused than have the ride completely gone. Last one, and this one got a lot of votes. The massive Six Flags expansion of the late 90s and early 2000s. This reaches pinnacle in 1999 and 2000, adding over 20 coasters to the chain each year. And that not only set the chain to a spiral of debt, but they turned Geauga Lake into the world's largest park, and that place couldn't really handle it, leading to its downfall and closure in 2007. We still love and cherish these coasters from their wild spending days, but from a business standpoint, no doubt this was a bad idea. The idea was, the more rides the parks had, the longer people would stay, the more money they'd spend. But I think you gotta add a ride and then rest on it for a year or 2 or 3, and then invest in something new after that. Don't add 4 new coasters at a time, or a new coaster year after year after year. I don't see how that's better than a steady flow of investment, the way Cedar Fair has built up Kings Island and Carowinds in Canada's Wonderland. Staffing is also a major issue, and if you expand too fast and can't get enough workers, you end up with half the park closed down. That was an issue with Great Adventure when they added 25 new rides in 1999. So there you go. Thanks again to everyone who commented and made this video possible. You all had some awesome ideas I didn't bring up in the first video, so it was good to get all this out in the open. If you have any thoughts on these topics, or if you have any other smart or dumb things to add, sound off in the comments below. Also, check out part 1 of this series. That's in my end screen and my links below. Before you go, don't forget to drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. Also, check out my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.